Hey guys, this is Chubbs back again with another ACS scripting tutorial, and today we're sort of going to be getting back to basics. We're not going to be doing anything nearly as complicated as the RPG experience system that we made in the last video. Instead, today we're going to be talking about some different script types, some ways that you can execute scripts, and things like that. So before we get into the actual scripting, let's go ahead and let's just go into visual mode, and I'll show you the little setup that I have here. So it's just a very basic square room, just like the kind that I usually have. And we have a player start, a super shotgun immediately ahead of the player start, and then we just have two former humans, and they're sort of lined up in a row here. So now that I've showed you that, we'll back out of visual mode. Let's pop open the script editor, and then I'll zoom in a little bit, that way you guys can see this easier. And since this is a brand new project and we have no scripts, the first thing I'll type is that important line at the top that I've mentioned numerous times before, and that is the pound sign or the number sign, include, space, and then inside quotations, zcommon.acs. So we'll get that out of the way. I'll go down a couple lines and we'll be ready to get started. So the first thing I wanted to talk to you guys about is something called named scripts. And I don't think I've covered this before, but it can be pretty important for making your scripts easier to read and identify. So up to this point, the way you've been doing scripts is sort of like this. So you've been entering the word script, and then the number of the script that you want, and then you could enter void, or instead of void you could do enter or open or whatever. We'll just do void. And then you would have your opening and closing brace, and you would do a script this way, and then of course you would put the code here. Well, what you can also do is, instead of having it be script 1, you could give it an actual name. So let's say we wanted this script to be some sort of a monster death event, like you wanted this script to run whenever a monster died. Well, instead of it saying 1, you could type quotations, and then inside the quotations you could give it whatever name you wanted to. So let's call it monster death event. So from now on, whenever we wanted to execute this script, we would execute it using the name monster death event instead of the number 1. And there is sort of a gotcha here, and I'm going to sort of show you guys that right now. So let's go ahead and compile this script, even though it doesn't have any actual, even though the script basically takes no actions. Let's go ahead and compile it, and it compiled successfully. So let's go out to one of these former humans, and let's say we wanted to give them that script. Let's right click, go to the action tab. Let's put in, for the action we'll put in the number 80, which is script execute. And if we try to go to the drop down menu, you'll notice that it's blank, and at this point you might be confused. You might think that you made a mistake somewhere, but what you have to be aware of is that if you use a named script, then you have to go over here to this checkbox that says named script, and you have to check it, and then any named scripts that you've written will appear here for you to choose. So that's that can be a gotcha. That's just something you have to be aware of, and that also impacts the way that you would execute scripts inside scripts, and we're about to go into that here in just a second. So let's uncheck that, and I'm going to go ahead and also take that action off of him for now, just to clear him out there and make sure neither one has an action. Let's go back to the script editor, and like I just said, if we were executing a script inside of a script, that would also change things. So if let's say that we have a script called script 2, and let's say it's a void script, and it does something different. Well, if we wanted to execute that script here, then we could just do ACS underscore execute, and then here inside parentheses we could type 2 for the script number, and then we could enter in the arguments, and those would be 0 for this one, because we wouldn't really want it to have anything else. And this would execute script 2 by using code. But let's say let's go down here to script 2. Let's say we wanted script 2 to execute this script. Well, we can't do it this way. like we just did. We can't do ACS execute, type in monster death event, and put in the arguments. That would not work. Instead, if you have a named script, what you have to do is you have to use ACS_named execute. This is a special function for named scripts. So if you start doing parentheses, notice that the variable type for the parameter here, or the argument, is string. So this is a special script. So you would enter in the name here, monster death event, comma, then you would put in your arguments, then you could compile it, and by having the named execute function, that would allow us to execute this script. So I wanted to let you guys know about that as well. That's kind of another gotcha. If you were to just do ACS execute and try to execute it this way, then it would not work, and you might also become confused and think that you had screwed up somewhere and maybe made a mistake with your monster death event script or something like that. So those are some important gotchas. But getting back to the concept of a named script, like I said, this is just important to make your scripts more informative and to basically give your scripts like a title, because like I said earlier, monster death event tells us a whole lot more than the number 1. Now, there is one other cool thing I wanted to show you guys, and it's sort of similar to a named script, but you can do this using a numbered script. So let's revert back to what we very first had when I typed this out, and that is just script 1. Well, let's say we wanted this to be the monster death event script, but we still wanted to sort of give it a name without turning it into a named script. Well, what you can do is you can click immediately after the opening brace here. You can do space, enter a comment, and then whatever your comment is will kind of become the name of the script up top. So let's type monster death event. This will be sort of like our title. Let's click the compile button, and if you look up top here, you'll see that the name of the script appeared, and then inside parentheses it tells you which script it refers to. Now, to give you guys a better idea of how this works, let's go down, let's do script 2, and we'll just do an enter script. And just like script 1, we're not even going to give it any actions, but let's say since this is an enter script, we wanted this to be some sort of like an initialization script. Let's do space, give it a comment, and type initialization. Let's compile. Now, if we click this drop-down menu, notice that it says initialization and then script 2 in parentheses. So you might be a little confused right now, or you might be wondering how exactly this could be helpful, because right now all we have are 2 scripts, and it's really easy to see all of these at once. But this would be very handy if you have a really large project, and if you were to have like dozens and dozens of scripts, because if you were looking for one very specific script to modify or to add something to, and you just wanted to look for that script based on its description or its name, then you could just come right up here to the drop down menu and you could look at it here and click it, and it would take you right to that script. And that would be much easier than if you did not have these. Let's compile again, and notice now all it has is just script 1, script 2. That doesn't really tell us anything. That would be much more tedious and confusing to try and find the script that you were wanting. So those are 2 methods you can use. Now, regardless whether you have a named script or a numbered script, your scripts can still do the same thing. A named script has no special capabilities or anything like that. It's really something that's there for convenience sake. And like I said too, if you just want to use a numbered script but sort of have a name, then you can use this method that I showed you there, where you put a comment after the closing or after the opening brace and then the name that you want. And whenever you compile it, you'll see it pop up here in the script editor up near the top. So the next thing I want to talk to you guys about is the way that you execute scripts. And before I get into this, I want to give a shout out to a user by the name of PalGamer630, because he sort of inspired this. in the last video that I did with the RPG experience system, he was telling me about how if he killed several enemies with a single blast, then he would only get credit for the experience from one enemy instead of the number of enemies that he killed. And that, that reminded me of something very important that I haven't told you guys about yet. So let's get rid of script 2. Let's keep script 1, and we are going to make this a monster death event. So to sort of illustrate the problem that he was having, let's just create a very simple example here. Let's create a variable. It's going to be an integer called kill count, and let's initialize it to 0. And let's say that whenever this monster death event script runs, we want to take kill count and we just want to add 1 to it. So we'll just say kill count equals kill count plus 1. Then let's say we just want to print it on the screen, whatever its value is. I'll just do print bold. Basically, I think the difference between print and print bold is that print bold is guaranteed to show up on your screen even if you're not the activator. I think print would also be fine in this case, but I'll just use print bold. And then I'll tell it to print the value of kill count, and we should be done. So again, to recap, whenever this script runs, kill count will be increased by 1, and then its value will be printed on the screen. So let's compile it, and let's close the script editor for now, and let's go to both of these former humans. We'll make sure that they're both selected, right click one of them, and we're now editing the properties of both of them. Let's give them both an action of 80 script execute, and let's tell them to execute script number 1. And this is also sort of cool here. Notice that since we put the comment after the opening brace, the comment that we typed is even showing up right here. So that makes it even easier for us to know exactly what the script's going to do that we're assigning. So we're giving both of these former humans the script execute action, and we're telling them to execute script 1, and this will happen when they die. So let's go ahead, let's test the map, let's pick up this super shotgun, and let's kill them both with a single blast, and let's see what number prints on the screen. Now remember, whenever we kill these guys, kill count will increase by 1. It starts at 0, so theoretically, if we kill them both, then the number 2 should print on the screen. But let's test the map and let's see what number appears. Alright, so as you could see there, it didn't do what we wanted. When we killed them both with a single blast, kill count showed up as 1. The number 1 printed on the screen. It might have been hard for you guys to see because when print runs, it prints in it's a pretty small font. But instead of kill count being increased to 2, it only increased by 1. And there's an important reason for that. If we select both of these guys and we go to their properties here, script execute has a serious limitation, and that is if you try to execute it simultaneously more than once, it will still only ever run once. So even though we're killing both of these guys with a single blast, script 1 is only running 1 time instead of running 2 times. Thankfully, there's a very easy way to get around this, and that is by going to your different script actions, and instead of script execute, choosing script execute always. Now the difference between these two is that whereas script execute can only ever run once, even if it's called simultaneously more than once, script execute always will always run as many times as it's needed. So if we kill both of these guys in a single blast, then script 1 will run twice like we would expect. Now at this point you're probably thinking to yourself, well, if that's the case, then why would I ever use script execute? Why not just always use this one, script execute always? Well, unfortunately, script execute always also has a limitation. So it basically has a limitation of its own, and that is if you execute a script this way, you can't terminate it or suspend it. So whenever that script runs, it has to run to completion. You can't stop it. So if you ever need to stop a script, you will want to use the regular old script execute. But in this case, we don't ever really need to stop this. All it's doing is counting, so we don't have to worry about that. So all that talking aside, let's go ahead, let's change this to script execute always. Let's make sure script 1 is selected, and now let's test the map, and let's kill them at the same time, and let's see what number appears. Alright, so as you could see that time, since we were using script execute always instead of script execute, the number 2 appeared, because when we killed them both, script 1 executed twice like we wanted it to, and that resulted in kill count being increased by 1 twice. So that is really important, and I hope I didn't confuse you guys there. Sorry for dragging that out a little bit, but I did want to cover that because that's something I've run into before, and I remember being confused by that years ago, and I didn't know about script execute always until fairly recently, and it's very handy. So with that out of the way, the next thing I want to talk to you guys about is how you would go about executing a script on a monster that you spawn. Now this is something else that viewers have asked about before, and I've never done a video on it, but since we're talking about executing scripts, I thought this video would be a perfect time to sort of cover that for you guys. So let's keep this monster death event script in place here, and let's go down, and what we're going to make is we're going to make an inner script. And what we want to do with this inner script is we want to make it so that when the player enters the level, it spawns a monster and it assigns it this script, so that when we kill the monster, kill count will increase, and then it'll print the value on the screen. So let's go down, we'll do script 2, and like I said, this will be an inner script, and I'm going to do the same technique here. I'm going to sort of give it a title, so I'm going to do a comment here, and let's just say monster spawn initialization, since we're running this script whenever the player enters and it's going to be spawning a monster. So what I've seen people try to do whenever they try to solve this problem is they first put down a map spot. Let's go ahead and let's place a map spot here. And this would be like where you would spawn a monster. And what they try to do is they try to go to the map spot and they try to give the map spot the script action. So since this is going to be a monster, let's use script execute always, and script it, we'll give it the script of 1, which is the death event, and they would try to handle it this way. And you would think that by doing that, if you spawned a monster here, then this would apply to the newly spawned monster, but that is actually not the case. That will not work. I'm going to show you guys how you can solve this problem. So first things first, this map spot does not have any sort of tag, so let's click new here. We'll give it a new tag. We haven't even used any tags, so it just gave it 1, which is that's fine. So we're going to spawn a former human here at this map spot that has a tag of 1, and whenever we spawn the former human here, we want to give him that script, the monster death event script. So we want to assign him this script. So let's do this step by step. So again, we wrote this new inner script, but we've not really given it any code. So let's go ahead and let's start doing that. So the first thing we want to do is spawn a monster, and I'm going to sort of comment it ahead of time, and then we'll write the code. So we want to spawn the former human. We'll put that code right here, and then we want to give the former human the script. So let's say assign former human script execute always. And these comments are probably unnecessary, but you can think of these as placeholders just to tell us what we need. So let's go ahead and let's type the code that we need here, and that is to spawn the former human. So I'll do thing underscore spawn facing. This is the spawn code that I always like to use. Then we'll go into parentheses, and these are the different parameters. You can look up this function on the ZDoom wiki if you'd like to, and it'll tell you more about it. The first parameter here is the thing ID. This is the thing ID of the map spot. Remember that we gave it an ID of 1, so we'll type that, comma. Type is basically like the number of the monster ID, and if we go to the ZDoom wiki here, let's pull it up real quick. Let's do thing underscore spawn facing. I'm going to look that function up, and then if we go here under usage and then type, you can see it gives you a link to spawn numbers. And then if we go to Doom spawn numbers, you have the numbers that correspond to each monster or each item. So a former human is referred to as a zombie man, so his spawn number is 4, as you can see there. So ZDoom wiki is incredibly useful. I know I've mentioned that I think 1,000 times now, but the wiki is an invaluable resource, and there's no way I can memorize all these, so I always have to reference it to get my numbers and all that stuff. So 4 is the spawn number we need. So let's go back to our map, pull up the script editor, and 4 is the value that we need for type. No fog, this is pretty irrelevant, but basically if we type 1, then that means there is no teleport fog. If we type 0, that means that it does leave teleport fog. We'll just type 0, comma, and this is probably the most important part here. So new thing ID, this is the ID that you're going to be giving the newly spawned monster. So all you have to do here is just give it an ID that hasn't been used yet. You can type whatever you want as long as it's a unique ID. In this case, since it's going to be a monster, just to be silly, I'm going to give it a brand new thing ID of 666, just an evil number. Then I'll type a semicolon. And so to recap what we've done here with this code, all we've done is we have spawned a former human at the map spot of 1, and we've given it an ID of 666. So when that former human comes into existence, 666 is the ID that it will have. Next, here is how we give it a script. We're going to be using a very cool function called setThingSpecial. And so what this function does is it gets a thing with a specific ID and it assigns it a special, similar to going out here into the editor and right-clicking it and giving it a special right here. So if we go back to the code, let's go ahead and type parentheses here to start entering the arguments or the parameters. You can see there are a bunch. So the first one it's asking for is the ID. This is just the ID of the thing that you want to give a special. We obviously want to give this special to the former human, and remember that we gave it an ID of 666. So let's go ahead and enter that ID in there. Let's do comma space, and this is sort of the good stuff here. Next, it's asking us for the number of the special. And what I like to do is I like to go out here into the editor and pull up the specials here and just use this as reference. So you're basically entering this stuff right now in the code. So for the special number, we want 226 because that's the script execute always. And I'm going to click cancel. I don't want to save this on the map spot. Remember, I'm just using this as reference. I'm going to click cancel. Let's go back to the editor. So 226 is the number of the special we want. Next is the first argument. So let's go back. And once again, I'm just going to go to this as reference. So the first argument is the script number. Well, the death event is script 1. So 1 is going to be the argument that we're going to enter for that. And notice here the rest of the arguments are 0. We're going to keep that in mind. So again, this is only for reference. I'm just using this to see what I need to enter. So I'm going to click cancel. Let's go back to the editor here. So the first argument, that was the script number, remember. That'll be 1. And like I said, the rest of the arguments we're not going to worry about. We're going to leave them at 0. So 0, 0, 0, semicolon to close it out. And just to be sure here, let's compile. And there we go. We compiled without any errors. So we sort of did a lot there, so I'm going to recap for you guys. So we have 2 scripts, obviously. this is the script that we're going to be focusing on. This is an enter script, which means it runs when the player enters the level, and what it does first is it spawns a former human, and the order of events here is very important. You want to spawn the former human first because we want to put it into existence and we want to give it an ID. And what we want to have happen after the former human has spawned is whenever it spawns and it's in existence, we want to immediately say, take the former human, which has an ID of 666, give it an action of 226, which is script execute always, and then these are just the arguments or the parameters, and this first one just refers to the number of the script. So we're saying give it an action of script execute always and have it execute script 1, which is this. So whenever this former human spawns, he's going to be given the script execute action, and we're going to tell him basically to have this script, and that way whenever he dies, this is the script that runs. So when it's all said and done, what should happen is when we enter the map, he will spawn in there, he'll be assigned this script, and then when we kill him, kill count will increase, and then it'll be printed on the screen, just like when we had the 2 former humans there earlier and I was running that demonstration for you guys. So let's go ahead and test the map. Let's make sure he spawns in, and let's make sure the script runs when I kill him. Alright, so that worked exactly like we wanted there. When we started the map, he spawned in, and thanks to that awesome set thing special function, we gave him the script to execute when he died, and that script of course ended up being this one. So when he died, we increased the value of kill count and we printed the value on the screen. So that's something that's been requested numerous times before, and I hope that really helped you guys out in case you were wondering how you would go about doing that. Now, the last thing I wanted to talk to you guys about today is the concept of script activators, and this is something else that's very important that can confuse you and maybe think you've done something wrong. So let's sort of simplify things here. I'm gonna erase script 2, and we're gonna keep the monster death event, and I'm gonna compile just to make sure we didn't mess anything up, so we're good to go there. And what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna get rid of this map spot. I'm going to put in a former human again. Instead of a map spot, we're just going to place a former human directly on the map, just like we had before. We're going to put him right here. Let's also give him the action of 226. This is script execute always, script 1. So we're sort of doing like what we had before, except instead of 2 former humans, I'm just going to have 1. And next, what I'm going to do for you guys is I'm going to place a demon on the map, aka a pinky. I'm going to make him face the former human, and instead of being an enemy, I'm just going to mark him as being friendly. And I'm going to demonstrate something really important to you guys here. So when the map starts, the demon is going to go up and kill the former human, and what I'm going to have happen, I think, instead of the kill count, let's do something different with the death event. Let's get rid of the kill count. Let's get rid of all this stuff. In fact, let's keep the script, but what I want to have happen is we're going to do a print bold, so no matter who the activator is, the message shows up, and we're going to say for print bold, player killed former human. This is going to be the message that shows up on the screen. So let's compile it, and let's pretend that you wanted this to be like an XP system, and when you killed the former human, something happened. Well, in this case, the result might be different than you're expecting. So when the demon kills the former human, the script is going to run anyways. So let's go ahead and test it, and you'll see what I'm talking about here. Alright, so what I wanted to show to you guys there, I think I explained it sort of poorly. What I wanted to demonstrate to you guys is that although the former human has a death event, this message showed up even though the Pinky was the one who killed him, not us. So you've probably run into this before if you've worked with an XP system or something like that, because in an RPG, like if you had an XP script on this guy, you probably wouldn't want the player to get XP. Like if a random friendly enemy killed him, you would only want the player to get XP if the player killed him. Well, thankfully there's a pretty easy way to get around that. The first thing you want to do is you want to have an inner script, and the main difference between an inner and an open script is that with an inner script, the player is considered the activator. So we'll cover this more as we get into it. So let's go back, let's do script 2 again. I probably should have left the one I had before. We'll do inner, do an opening and closing brace, and I'm going to go ahead and put a comment here. Let's say, we'll just call it initialization, just to give it a title. So, like I said, with inner, the player is considered the activator of that script, and that's going to come in handy here in just a second. With open, basically like the game world is considered the activator. So if you need to manipulate the player with an open script, then it's not ideal. If you want to get the player's information, then you want to use inner, since he is the activator. So that's going to come into play right here. So what we want to have happen is when the player enters the level, we want to give him an ID, because by default he doesn't have an ID. And this also brings me to another gotcha. So you might think, well, why would I do that here? Why wouldn't I just go to the player start and give him an ID here? Well, that doesn't work. You might think that you could go here to his player start and type in a tag, and you might think that that would be the player's tag, but it doesn't work that way. Unfortunately, it's not that easy. You have to sort of do it here in the script. So going back to the script editor, we can use a very handy function called thing_change TID. Remember that I said, like I was saying a second ago, that with inner, the player is the activator. Well, anytime you have an activator, if they don't have a tag currently, then their ID is considered 0. Well, the player obviously doesn't have a tag yet, so we're going to enter 0, comma, and notice this is already sort of telling us what's going on. So 0 is the old ID, and next we enter in the new ID. This is going to be like the ID that we want to give the player. So let's say that I want the player's ID to be 1337, like leaked, just to sort of be silly. We'll go ahead and do that, put a semicolon, compile, and so what we've said is that whenever the map runs, basically whenever the player enters the level, take his ID, which is 0, and instead turn his ID into 1337. And now what we can do is we can go up here and we can use a very basic conditional statement on this death event, and we can check to see whether or not the player is the activator. So what we can do is we can say if, and then inside parentheses we can say if activator TID, and then put a pair of parentheses, 2 equal signs 1337, and I'll go back over this. So basically this is asking if the activator ID is equal to 1337, then we're going to print this message. Let me get the spacing right here. Sometimes the spacing sort of messes up on you. Alright, so if the activator, or if the ID of the activator is 1337, then print the message that the player killed the former human. Otherwise, nothing's going to happen because we have no code that follows here. So this is an easy way to run a check to see whether or not the player is the killer, because remember, when this inner script runs, the player's ID is set to 1337, and then whenever this monster death event code runs, the only time this message will appear is if the ID of the activator is the player. So remember, the Pinky, he doesn't even have an ID. His ID is not going to match 1337. Only the player is going to match that. So to test it, let's go ahead and compile. Let's run it. First, let's let the pinky kill the former human just like we did the first time. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to restart the map and I'm going to kill him. And let's see when the message shows up and when it doesn't show up. Alright, so that worked out just as I'd planned, or just as I'd hoped. So notice that when the pinky killed the former human, nothing happened at all. You didn't see a message or anything. But when I restarted the map and I killed the former human, we saw the message print on the screen. And this is because, like I said, going back to our scripts that we wrote, first when we entered the map, we were given an ID of 1337. Next, when the former human died, this conditional statement was performed, and this basically checked to see who the activator was, or what the ID of the activator was. And the double equal sign is just a comparison to check for 1337. So it's asking, is the ID 1337? If this check is passed, in other words, if the player's the killer, then it prints the message that the player killed the former human. Otherwise, nothing happened at all because we don't have anything else. Now, if you wanted to, let's say we go to the pinky, we can give him an ID out here. You can't do that on the player start, but we can do that on the pinky. Let's go here. Let's give the pinky an ID of 5. We've not used 5 yet. Click OK. Let's go here. Let's say else if the activator's ID is equal to 5, then print, let's say pinky killed former human. So you could do that. Let's go ahead and let's just test that real quick. This should work fine, I believe, but we'll test it just to be sure. So when the pinky kills the former human, then this unique message should show up for him, since the ID is a match, and since we gave him an ID of 5 by tagging him with 5 outside here in the editor. Okay, so that worked just like I thought it would. Well, I think that's really covered just about everything. So we've talked about numbered and named scripts. We talked about some different ways that you can execute scripts. I've showed you guys how you can give spawned monsters a script execution. We've talked about script activators and how you can change IDs and check for IDs, and that way you can do things like making sure that scripts only run if the player's the activator and not like another monster or anything like that. And so we covered a lot here. I'm probably going to put some times in the video description so you guys can click on them to skip through to the relevant sections, because this is sort of a longer video than I expected. But I hope all this stuff has helped you guys out. I think it's certainly more basic than the RPG system that we made in the last video, but it's also extremely important, and I think this will open up even more possibilities for you guys. So again, I hope this helped you all out. If you have any questions about any of these things, or if you need to know anything else, then feel free to leave a comment below. And again, I appreciate all you guys for continuing to tune in, and for all of you guys who have stayed subscribed to my channel. I really appreciate it, and I hope to do many more tutorials in the future. So thanks again for watching, and this is Chubb signing out.